Every now and then I do a reel, and if it's controversial, I come back and try to do a video or a live about it. I decided to do a video about this circumstance because the comments that were made about that reel were overwhelming, and people kept wanting to know what happened next. And they said, what about part two and part three? And there was no part two or part three. I was just letting them know something that had happened. And in a reel, you don't really have that much time to explain. You have 90 seconds at the most, and you really can't say everything you want to say in those 90 seconds. So I thought I would come here today to clarify some things that may not have been brought out in that reel. In that reel, I was talking about a friend of mine, of course it's a true story, who after 40 years of marriage, she and her husband, they had children who are adult children, and those adult children had moved out of the home. So it was just she and her husband. They had a fabulous marriage. I mean, they went places together. They remodeled their house after the children had gotten out. They went on all kinds of trips. Every time you heard from them, they were going here, they were going there, they were going on cruises. I mean, they enjoyed life. They had retired, and it made you want to be their good friend so you could go along with them. But they didn't have to have anybody to go with them. They made their plans and they went wherever they wanted to go. One day they were in the kitchen eating, because that's where they like to eat their meals, in the kitchen. When the children were there, they would eat in the dining room, even though the kitchen would suffice, but they had so much clutter on the kitchen table for 6 people. They had 4 adult children. And so the two of them just decided to sit in the kitchen. And so he said to her, "I want a divorce." Now, that shocked her. Number one, they had not talked about anything like that. Number two, he had not eased into the conversation. Just out of the clear blue sky, she thought, he wanted to introduce this kind of conversation. She just wasn't ready for it. So she said, "What do you mean? What are you talking about? You want a divorce after all this time together? After all we've been to one another? You want a divorce just like that with no warning?" And he said, "Yes, I've had a happy marriage with you. You're my best friend. We've had a love affair that was second to none. I know you love me and you know that I love you, but there's someone that I want to be with, and I don't want to live a lie, and I don't want to be without this person." So she said, "Well, tell me about her. Where did you meet her? Is she anybody I know? Did we go to school together? It must be somebody I know. But I'm trying to, who is she? Who is she?" And he said, "Well, he is a good friend of mine." She was shocked. She just sat back in her chair. He said, "Yes. We've been going together for a good while, and I want to spend the rest of my life with him. There are no guarantees. We've been married 40 years, over 40 years now. We've had a happy life together, and I feel that I want to continue being happy. and I want you to be happy. She said, well, I am happy. I'm happy with you. I'm happy because we've built this house and we have property and we have money and we have everything that any family would want. We have it right here. So then he said, well, let's talk about it. So they talked about it all through dinner until they finished dinner. They washed dishes together, still talking about it. They went to bed, still talking about it. They did not go to sleep that night, still talking about it. They got up the next morning, still talking about it. Over until the next day, still talking about it. Now you might say, why were they talking about it all that time? Well, there were questions she had to have answers to. And then he wanted to make certain that she understood what was going on. Of course, she asked questions. When did this start? Who is he? Where did you meet him? And on and on and on. See, so it took time to ask the questions, to answer the questions. And see, that's the type of husband he was. He wasn't a brash person who said, I'm not going to talk about it. I don't have to tell you nothing. I don't have to say nothing to you. He was not that type. He was concerned about her. So he took the time to explain everything to her because he knew, number one, it was going to be a shock. Number two, it would disrupt the family. And he wanted to do everything he could to make the transition easy. So he answered every question. And believe you me, she said that she asked him every question that came up. And since they didn't rush and had nowhere else to go, he could talk to her. She could talk to him. She said, we did not fuss at all. I did not get mad with him at all. She said, I felt like I want to get mad, but I didn't get mad. And he didn't get mad. It was a calm conversation. And she just didn't believe it. She could not believe, number one, that he would come to her with that kind of information. And number two, that they were in for that kind of discussion that night. Well, as I explained to the people in the reel, they talked and talked and talked. And after the next morning, she said, I'm fine with it. We'll get a divorce. Thank you for being so gentle with me and telling me all of this information. You left no stone unturned to tell me what I needed to know. He told her, you will never have to worry because you will keep this house. I'm not going to try to take this house from you. You and I will talk about how we want to divide whatever we want to do. We will talk about it because I don't want to disrupt your mental health and I don't want you disrupting my mental health. Of course, they had to talk about the children. So what happened next was they all went to therapy with the counselor talking to them about it. First, the wife went by herself. She was surprised that she was not upset more than she was. Then she had the children to go. 2 boys and 2 girls. Well, they were men and women. They went together. The 4 children went alone. I guess that's what I should have said. Then after they went together, the 4 children, then the mother and the children went. Then the husband and father went alone. Then he went with the wife. Then he went with the children. Then the mother and father went with the children. So it was the nuclear family together. Later, his companion came in for a discussion. See, so that therapist was really on the ball. That therapist was worth her weight in gold, because the family had never met the companion, but they did meet the companion. He seemed to be a nice man from what I understand. The question is, how would you have taken it? But I think it just depends on how it is brought to you and the approach. Because if you are a secure person, you would be able to handle it with no problem. Of course, things happen in our lives that can discombobulate us and have us spinning with mental health issues very quickly, because some people look at it as being shocking. Some look at it as being toxic. Some look at it as being something that they could never imagine. And we grew up learning that if a man has a companion that is a same-sex companion, the woman cannot compete with that. So that means you need to go into it with a certain mindset. Maybe with another woman, you might want to compete, but with a man, you can't compete with that. Especially when your husband has said to you, I love him and I want to spend the rest of my life with him. The nuclear family had no reason to think that the father and husband would not be in a secure relationship. So, to bring the story to closure for those who want part 2, there is no part 2, because each of them is still living. They are still enjoying their lives. No, they don't do everything together. He has separated himself with his companion. Once in a while, they might get together, Thanksgiving or Christmas or something like that, but they're not best buddies where they feel like they have to get together all of the time for some reason. The wife has friends and family, and she goes on trips. She has affiliated with the organizations that she used to belong to, and she's just living her life. The children are living their lives, their grandchildren, and the grandchildren know the grandmother and the grandfather and the companion. They have not married yet. The companions have not married yet, but they're thinking about getting married. So there is no part 2, because life continues. And I'm just thankful that in this scenario, in this situation, in this life situation, it was handled beautifully. It was an unusual circumstance. The way it was explained was palatable for all concerned. And so it made for a very nice ending. Life continues.